Welcome to the Strong Youth Project, where our mission is to improve organized sport experiences for youth, parents, coaches, and other mentors via education and evidence-based practice.
Hello, SYP listeners. We are back with another podcast episode. My name is Savannah Dixon. I'm a public relations representative for the Strong Youth Project, and today we are going to be interviewing our track star, Miss Jayda Lee.
Hi.
Jayda, do you mind introducing yourself to us a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So I grew up in Oregon, and my family's a huge track family. My dad played college football and track and field, and I grew up playing volleyball and basketball mostly, and then when I got to high school I also did track and field, and I just loved all three of them. I always told people my favorite sport was just whatever one I was in. I just loved all three so much. I'm now a sophomore here at BYU, and I'm on the track and field team, and I'm studying bioinformatics, and yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's awesome. What events are you doing in track?
I throw hammer and discus and weight throw.
Wow, okay, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it's
super
fun.
cool. So you said growing up you played 3 sports.
Mm-hmm.
Did you play all 3 of those sports from the time like middle school all the way through high school, or are you focusing on one sport?
Yeah, I kind of gradually added them. So I started volleyball when I was in 4th grade.
Okay.
So that was like my first love. And I literally ate, slept, and dreamt about volleyball all the time. I always had a volleyball in my hand. I loved volleyball so much. And then I was tall, and so in 7th grade, the volleyball team was like, you should do basketball. So I tried out for basketball, and I did that. And then in high school, I started track and field because there just wasn't a good club for that when I was younger. So yeah, I kind of slowly added a sport in.
Okay, got it. And then how did you decide that you wanted to do track and field here at BYU? What made that change for you?
So I actually originally, my dream was to play volleyball in college.
Okay.
Like I said, I love volleyball. It's my first love. And I would say I was good enough at it to be able to do that. But I ended up being really good at track and field, and my dad loves track and field, and he was really like the motivator behind it, and he really believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And so with his help, I was able to get good enough to get an offer here at BYU. And now looking back, I'm so glad that I'm doing track and field. I think it's a perfect fit for me. It's a perfect sport, and I still miss volleyball so much. I love it so much, but I'm really glad I'm doing track and field.
That's awesome. That's a cool story that you have. So in regards to sports specialization, which is something with the Strong Youth Project that we talk a lot about, and the importance of not necessarily specializing as early in one particular sport. I know that you said you were maybe thinking about doing club volleyball or club basketball, but that would have been the thing that would have specialized you in one of those things.
Yeah.
How are you able to balance all 3 sports but also maintaining competitiveness with it?
Yeah, it was kind of hard because I knew that I could have been better if I had specialized in one of them. But I think I just really had to think like what's best for me and what's best for my body. With volleyball, like I'm sure most volleyball players struggle with, I was already having shoulder problems. I was already kind of having some of those pains that would have just gotten worse if I had specialized. And I also just didn't want to get burnt out of any sport because I saw so many people, and I saw so many people like dump so much money into a sport to play club and to get really good and to be able to make it to the next level. And then if they didn't make it to the next level, it's like, was that worth it, right? Like, did all of that pay off? And so maybe I was not willing to take the chance, but I think I really was just thinking about like, okay, financially and for my body and for my mental health. And I wanted to enjoy these sports, and I never wanted to stop loving them. And so that's why I just decided to, focus on one at a time. And I just because of that, I never got burnt out. And so when I was in one, like I was just 110%, and I could work so hard, and I never really got tired of it, and I always looked forward to the next season. I could say like, okay, I'm kind of getting tired of this now, like I'm ready for the next thing. And so that just really helped me to like keep rotating through and to keep just always be at 110% and to not get tired of one and to not get injured too. I never really struggled with bad injuries, knock on wood, but I'm really grateful for that.
That is amazing, because I feel like that is such a rare thing to have amongst when you're playing so many sports in high school, is injury. And I agree totally with what you said about not specializing and dumping all of your time, effort, energy, money into one thing, because at the end of the day, you don't know if that's exactly going to work out for you. So that's a great example and testimonial of why it's important to play a wide variety of sports. Because look at you now, you're killing it.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I think playing so many sports has helped me in track and field so much. Like,
totally.
Because I had to learn so many different skills all the time in so many different sports. Like, I've learned how to adapt, and that's all about throwing and other sports too, right? But like, because of that, now I can pick up on cues really quickly, and I can apply what my coach is telling me because I had all that experience with different sports and having to learn new skills all the time.
That's amazing. I love it. That, again, ties exactly into what we talk about a lot with the Strong Youth Project, is how various coaching cues work for some athletes and some don't. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the way you specialize in sports early and get used to certain cues from coaches. So that's really cool that you've been able to have that experience. And also with injuries. Injuries are a huge part of sports and athletics and everything. And the fact they're able to not technically have huge injuries because of your wide variety of sports and using all different parts of your body for various different things is a huge indicator of how important it is truly to prioritize yourself.
Yeah, seriously.
Awesome.
I'm so grateful that that's how it ended up for me.
That's awesome. That's super cool. So another topic we wanted to jump into is you mentioned how your dad was a huge key advocate for you in your track and field experience. Walk us through a little bit what that relationship looked like with your dad.
Yeah. So my dad coached somebody that was like 4 or 5 years older than me all throughout his high school years.
Okay.
And his senior year of high school, he ended up doing really well at state. And my dad came home, he looked at me, he's like, "You're going to be a thrower." And I was like, "Okay, Dad." So that summer, that was the summer before freshman year, we started throwing. It was so hard. And like, honestly, I tell people it was literal blood, sweat, and tears, like all the time. It was so hard. It's a weird sport too. And it's not as exciting as volleyball. You know, it's not constantly changing, and basketball. And so it's definitely different, and it was an adjustment. But my dad like just had this like belief in me that I was going to be so good. And I was scrawny. Like, I'm still not very big, but like I was tiny. I was like, had no muscle. Like, you would have looked at me. And even my high school coach, I remember like I told him my goal freshman year, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yep, that's what I'm going to do." And so anyways, like, that's just to paint the picture. But yeah, my dad was my coach. I obviously had a high school coach, but my dad and I would go and throw almost every day, like outside of high school practice. And then like during COVID, especially, that was my junior year, it canceled my high school season, but my dad was like, "Nope, we're going to get strong." So that's really when I started weightlifting. And honestly, like, COVID was obviously a really hard thing. It's not something I would ever wish to happen. There were a lot of unfortunate things that happened, but it was such a blessing in my life, because that's when I really started to get strong and be able to throw consistently. And there were these virtual meets my dad and I did. So we were spending a lot of time together, and it was awesome. I was improving a lot, but it was also really hard because I had to really balance this, like, okay, my dad is my dad and my dad is my coach. And obviously the way he coaches me is not the same way he's going to be my dad.
Totally.
Yeah. And so it kind of caused, not even kind of, it definitely caused contention, and we would argue, and there would be times that I thought I knew what was best for my throwing, and I was kind of transitioning to the point where I was good enough to kind of figure things out for myself too, but obviously having a coach is helpful as well, and you still need that. And so we really had to work through that, and I think it could have destroyed our relationship, but I think as we worked through it and we both kind of balanced, he realized like, okay, I need to trust her more and let her kind of take the reins a bit more. And then as I said, okay, I need to trust him a bit more, it helped. But having a parent as a coach can be really difficult, and like, I'm totally aware of that. And it's such a blessing because my coach lives with me, and I can ask him questions anytime. We'd like come home from a meet and we'd go out in the garage and like do dry runs because I was so frustrated with how I did. And I recognize that a lot of kids can't do that, but I also recognize like it can be a really hard thing at the same time, and so you really do have to find that balance and have that conversation too, because I know my dad loves me, and I know that everything he did was just because he loves me, and he saw what I could do, and he wanted me to achieve that. And it was from a place of love, but sometimes you have to have that conversation too of like, Dad, sometimes I just need you to be my dad, and I don't need my coach right now, I need my dad. And so we had to have some of those tough conversations, but I think our relationship really grew from it. But yeah, it can be really difficult at the same time.
Oh, totally. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it's very personal for you, so thank you for being open about it, because that's something that a lot of people deal with, especially I think here in Utah, where there are a lot of small towns and where your parents are the only ones that are able to coach you because of just population numbers.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you share that perspective, because it can be really contentious between parents and their children, and these parents at the end of the day, they just want the best for you, but sometimes that might come across differently than how it probably should come across. So I love how you explained you're able to overcome that contention that you guys had with other ways of continuing the love and family bond in your relationship, which is really cool.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And honestly, some of the best athletes I know, their parent was their coach. And so I do think that there is a lot to say about, like, you know, when you have your coach living with you, but there is definitely a balance, and there can be boundaries that can be set too.
I agree. I totally agree. I think there really needs to be a balance when it comes to family relationships and sports. It's another huge concept that we talk about a lot with SYP, and how we can improve that, because we want to have what you have with your dad, but everyone wants to have that experience. So hopefully everyone out there listening can take a lesson from Jayda's story. One more thing we wanted to talk with you about are sports and anxiety, because I know that's something that you have experience with.
Yeah.
So in high school, was this something you dealt with, or when did you realize that sports anxiety was something on your mind?
Yeah, honestly, as far as sports go, I never really struggled with anxiety in high school. My parents would always tell me, like, wow, you're so good under pressure. Like, I could always hit that game-winning shot. I could, like, score the game-winning point. Like, that never really was hard for me. But I do think I struggled with anxiety in high school, but I don't think I really admitted it to myself. I mostly struggled with, like, social anxiety. And it was, like, really hard for me, but, you know, there's this stigma that, oh, if you go to therapy, if you have anxiety, then, like, that's a bad thing. And so I think I was afraid to admit that to myself, especially because I had, you know, when you're successful at sports at a not huge high school, like, you become well known, and there's this sort of stigma, and people have this perception of you, and I think, and I'm a perfectionist too. I didn't want to break that. I wanted everyone to think I was perfect, and a lot of people did think I was perfect, and I think a lot of athletes struggle with that, because people see that they're successful in sports and they're well known in their school, and you start to get this idea in your head that, like, everyone thinks I'm perfect, and it's really hard because you know you're not perfect. And so that starts to eat away at you, and I think that's really what got to me, was that people thought I was perfect, and I knew I wasn't, and I made a lot of mistakes. And so I started to get into this perfectionist anxiety state. And so I never really took care of it in high school. I went off to college, and I still was definitely struggling with it, but I never really got help. I finally decided to go to a therapist because I wasn't competing well. And I was like, okay, I can handle social anxiety, I can handle anxiety, but if it's affecting the way I'm competing and I'm performing, like, I need to take care of this.
Totally.
And so I saw one of our therapists, and it was just really helpful. Like, the first session, I just kind of, like, talked about everything that was going on, and it was just so nice to have someone to kind of open up about everything, someone that doesn't know you, doesn't know your life, isn't really connected, because I love my mom. I talk to her about everything too, but it's nice to have someone else to go to. And as I worked with this therapist, she kind of gave me some coping mechanisms for how I can deal with that performance anxiety, and I ended up PRing in all my events at the last meet after working with her, and so it was really cool to see how working with that really paid off. But I was still struggling. I hadn't gotten medicated. I didn't really feel like it was that bad, but then I left on my mission. I served in Korea.
Oh, wow.
And while I was there, there's a lot of stuff that can cause anxiety, and I was definitely struggling with it there. I saw a therapist, and that's like the first time I started thinking about like maybe I should get on medication for this. But I was scared because, like, I hate to say this, but like a lot of people that, there's this stigma of like, oh, if people who are on anxiety medication are weird. And I was like, I don't want to be weird.
No, yes, I completely understand that. Yeah.
And so I was so scared. But I ended up actually, while I was in Korea, I had to get an emergency surgery.
Oh, wow.
And so I got that surgery, I recovered there, and I was just not doing well mentally because I had to just sit in my apartment 24/7. I couldn't go out for a month. And as a missionary, like that's
so
sucks.
hard.
It's so
really
hard because that's like you go from being so busy and feeling so important to absolutely doing nothing. And so after that, I went home to recover physically, but I also needed to recover emotionally and mentally. And so I went home and I started seeing a therapist about all the stuff I went through my surgery, and then also still just this anxiety. And I started talking more seriously about getting on medication, and I was nervous, and I was like, do I really need this? Do I not? But as I talked to people, they really just described it as, medication just kind of brings you down to like a normal level.
Totally.
And then as you go to therapy and you get those coping mechanisms that can help you deal with it and actually be able to live and function and thrive. And when people put it that way, I was like, okay, like that sounds great. And so I got on medication and I started taking it, and at first, I mean, anyone who's been through this process, it takes a while to start to feel the effects of it, but now I can say I'm so glad that I went on to medication. I ended up going back out on my mission.
Wow.
It was such a miracle and such God's plan that I came home, because I wouldn't have been able to start medication if I hadn't. And I think it just helped me have such a better second half of my mission. I was able to go back out and just finish strong. And so anxiety and depression and mental health problems are real, and normal people struggle with them too. And it doesn't mean that like you're weak. I mean, it's just like an injury. If someone breaks their leg, you're not going to tell them to just suck it up and push through it, right? Like you're going to give them the mechanisms and the coping strategies that they need. And so it's the same thing with our mental health. It's just a little less visible. And so I always tell people, if they're ever even considering like getting medicated for it, like it's not a bad thing. It's super helpful. It's blessed my life. It's helped me build better relationships, compete better, do better in school, just every aspect of my life. So I'm so grateful that I was able to do that.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's a powerful story you have to share. I could not agree more with everything that you said. Sports performance anxiety is real, and it affects everyone in different ways. Depression, anxiety, OCD, everything. There's a lot that falls under that umbrella, and it can feel, I don't know, it might seem not the norm to have that, but I appreciate your willingness to share about it and just help create an awareness for athletes that it's okay to struggle with this. It's okay to have these issues, and we have the resources at the palms of our hands to help us overcome this. And at the end of the day, we have our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who is our biggest advocate, who wants the best for us too, along with our family and friends. So thank you for sharing that. Of course.
And and like in sports too, like perfectionism is such a big thing. It's a thing that I think every athlete struggles with, and you always feel like you're coming up short. You never feel like you're doing enough. And that's something that I've really had to work through too, that like you got to take care of yourself too, and your best is going to look different every day. And so if you're not spending 2 hours in the weight room every day, it doesn't mean you're a failure, and it doesn't mean you're not going to be a good athlete. Because your best is going to look different every day depending on how you're feeling and what's going on in your life. And if you can't do that, like that's okay. And I'm just so grateful that like we have a God and a Savior that we can turn to, and they know us perfectly, and they know exactly how we feel too, which is amazing, because with mental health stuff, a lot of times it can feel like nobody understands, but they really do.
I love that. Your best looks different every day. That's a great quote, and something that I want to add to my life and keep looking at, because perfectionism is something I think a lot of BYU students struggle with. Not just athletes, but I think also students all over the world and athletes all over the world. It's constantly like comparing yourself to others and seeing what I need to be better at. But at the end of the day, our best is our best, and if we give it our best, then that's what we need to be proud of.
Totally, I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jayda, for being willing to share your stories with us,
Of course.
share with us your experiences. We hope that this will help spread awareness to everyone listening to this podcast. We're really grateful for everything you had to share.
Thanks for having me. It was such a privilege. I'm so grateful.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jayda, and thanks for everyone for listening to this.